So 12 weeks ago, we sent a Quest 3 to Brittany Pierone with a crazy ask. Learn Gravity Sketch, design a product, and present the final product at Around 3D Design Festival. And the reason why we did that is because we wanted to see the authentic journey of a designer into spatial craftsmanship. So very excited for this session. Brittany is extremely talented. She's got a very impressive background at Nike and Fear of God, but she's completely new to VR. So it's amazing to see her work and see her process of learning and exploring how Gravity Sketch can fit into her workflow. So I've been following Brittany for a very long time, since her days at Nike. She's a must follow on Instagram, one of those creators that will stop you scrolling and get you doing. It's very inspirational to see her work. So I'm going to invite Brittany to the stage. Welcome, Brittany. Hi. Brittany, how you finding the festival so far? I know you were in the session at the very start of the day, 6 o'clock in the morning for you, I think.
Yeah, it was really great. This is pretty fun and exciting.
Nice one. Well, I'm very excited to see your session, and I'm going to leave it to you, and then I'm going to jump back on the stage at the end of your talk for a bit of Q&A. So over to you, Brittany.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Gravity Sketch for the opportunity, and I'm excited to share a little bit of my story, my design approach, and then, as Dan mentioned, the process of developing a product from scratch, starting with learning Gravity Sketch, which was on my to-do list for a while. So I'm really happy that they reached out, and I'm excited to share a product and a process with you all today. So I'm going to jump into my presentation and go from there. Okay, so Proof of Concept is my company. We are a design company, and we are based here in Los Angeles. A quick little background on me. I have a degree in industrial design. I went to Arizona State, and I discovered design in high school, where my pole vault coach took me to Nike. I grew up in Oregon, and he showed me design, and I was like, I can't believe that you get paid to draw shoes and work with athletes. And so that was what led me kind of to want to kick off my career in design at Nike, and specifically in footwear. So kind of the first pillar, I would say, of my ideology is obviously first rooted in industrial design. And then the second would be sports performance and the needs of sports performance product. And after that, I went to Fear of God, where I got exposed to a much more charismatic world of fashion. They definitely move at a quicker pace. Typical timeline for a project in sports performance would be closer to 1.5 to 2 years. At Fear of God, we could turn around ideas in as short as 6 months. So this is us in Italy. I'm in the corner there of the picture. And then from there, I went on to be a design director at James Perse. James Perse is a really similar brand to Fear of God, but for a little bit, I would say, older consumer. Kind of like if Fear of God grew from the 20-year-old to maybe the 40 or 50-year-old, and so on. James Perse is an incredible brand. He has everything from properties in Mexico that you can rent out and come with a private jet, all the way through to cashmere sweaters and surfboards and pool tables. And so I think James kind of really built a whole world, and people that fell in love with his basics have followed him on this journey of these other products that he can make. And so all three of these jobs, and then of course my career, degree in industrial design, is what really led me to Proof of Concept. And so I would say the other thing that really sets me apart from other designers, and probably why Gravity Sketch has been such a great partnership for me, is I truly am a maker. I really think in 3D before I think in other ways. And a lot of designers are known for their beautiful sketches and their rendering and their ability to communicate visually. I tend to communicate by making objects. And that's a lot of prototyping and mock-ups, from foam to foam core boards to sewing bags in my living room before I give them to a factory. So all of that really informs my approach and my methodology when it comes to design. And so this is a little quick overview just so you can get in your head a visual of what proof of concept kind of represents in the real world in 3D. So we do several categories. We do accessories, furniture, and then ready to wear. And I think kind of taking a page out of James's book, the idea of world building and just offering a whole lifestyle of, items that I would want in my life, items I would want to wear, and solving problems kind of all along the way is something that maybe fashion doesn't really do as much. And so I really look at proof as trying to blend, the rhyme or reason or the intelligence of industrial design with the charismatic emotion and expression of fashion, and presenting industrial design in a capacity that fashion presents, their kind of main idea for the season. And there's way more kind of self-expression, I would say, and storytelling in fashion and even in sports performance as opposed to industrial design. And so just blending all of those into one is kind of this is the beginnings of the world of proof of concept. And so kind of three things about proof. Fundamentally, we believe good design makes the world a better place. Kind of why else do all of this work? Secondly, the vision really is that functional minimalism is a lifestyle. So again, with the industrial design piece, it's things have a reason for being. They're functional. They're solving a problem. It's human-centered design, and then adopting, minimalism and brutalism and kind of clashing those like aesthetics and ideologies with, functionality to yield, kind of our just hallmark aesthetic or trademark aesthetic. And then the goal or the mission is really to inspire the next generation of creatives. Because of the career path that I've had, my DMs and my email and my LinkedIn are just full of young people really trying to figure it out. And really none of us have it figured out. A lot of us are just winging it and winging it loudly. And sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not. And so I really have a heart for helping those around me and those behind me kind of connect their dots. And so I see a future where, similar to what Gravity Sketch is doing with Around, but young people could come to workshops, they could get, mentorship. We can have programs where the brand is not just standing for aesthetic and functionality, but we're really saying we're investing our dollars into giving back to the creative community. And so you could come to our program and get, a crash course on how to build a website. You could get a crash course on the Adobe suite and everything you need to know about Photoshop, Illustrator, Lightroom, Premiere Pro. If you want to put together a portfolio and you're kind of struggling in college and maybe, you're not quite sure how to organize it, come sit in on a lecture. So it really, to me, is not worth it to just make beautiful things and to sell them. It really is about people and connecting with people, staying connected to what young people are doing. And I personally am a product of heavy mentorship and people believing in me. And so I wish that the brands that I bought, really were investing back into their communities. And I think as sustainability and purpose-driven consciousness is becoming more and more popular, it's becoming more and more understandable that when we align with brands, we're aligning our values and we're voting with our dollars. And so proof is really, really about community and young people and pouring back into them and doing fly, cool, functional things to make it happen. So like I mentioned, we do these different categories of home products. This could be accessories for the home. This can be furniture. At some point we would love to do a hotel and kind of property driven work. For sure, we do accessories and obsessing the travel experience. And then ready to wear. This is, elevated, but accessible modern workwear, predominantly unisex pieces because I shop a lot of menswear, but still make it fly as a woman. And then, of course, this notion of incubation that I just mentioned. These are kind of our 4 pillars of our business. And, yes, we're making concepts, but we also kind of believe that young people are proofs of concepts. And if they were just believed in, they would realize the future that they would, want. So, this is another moment here where, like I mentioned, functional minimalism is like what we really believe in. And so you can see these are our stools. This came from a night of wanting to go out with my homegirls, and I had a dress on, and I was annoyed that I was going to have to kind of wrinkle my whole dress to put on my shoes. And so I wish my shoes came to me. And so after several iterations, this is kind of where I landed. And that's how you sit on it. And so, yeah, you can kind of grasp really what I'm talking about when I say it's functional, because the actual design has a rhyme or reason for being. There is a way to use it, but it's obviously minimalist, and it would fit in, kind of any exquisite home. So, this is kind of the ethos of our approach to design, and really editing away the things that are not important in the design and allowing the function to thrive, but then of course considering aesthetic and equal, partnership. A lot of times in industrial design, we're so concerned with, how it functions, how it fits in the user's life or in the user's world or hand or whatever that human touch point is, that it ends up kind of abandoning like this element of aesthetic or swag or beauty. And then a lot of times in fashion, you see people wearing or walking in items that look super, super cool, and they look amazing. They look super fly and stylish, but they're like in pain, or it's raining and now their clothes are wet or whatever the case may be. And so a lot of times these values are exchanged, and they are not necessarily either mutually beneficial or mutually honored. And so I think that's something that really makes proof unique is this deep consideration for utility, while not sacrificing aesthetic. And so, again, here's a couple more examples of what I was mentioning. One of my challenges here, this first green dot, is if we were to spend a decent amount of money on a backpack, but then you live in New York, let's say, and you're on the subway every day, you wouldn't want the backpack to get dirty. And so this is a hood that, zips completely out and covers the entire bag, and then crumples back up into a ball that's about the size of your fist, and, shoves back down into the backside of the bag. And so again, it's minimalist, and it's very, very discreet, but yet it has intrinsic function. Another small consideration that's an example of this is just little touch points. So these are my zipper pulls, and designing them to hold your thumb, and just taking consideration in every moment that form is present. Can you make that form functional? Can that form have a rhyme or reason for being while still totally being beautiful? And so the front there is where that green dot is, and then the branding is hidden on the back. Another example is this tote bag. You can't see that it opens, but it's magnetic. And when you pull the handles, it opens like an accordion. And there's like 3 major slots in the middle that, give you like four different bags or 4 different pockets, and then multiple components of storage for, shoes or a laptop or, notebooks, whatever you may want to pack in there. But then when you close it, it's literally just a monolithic tote bag. And it's magnetic, and this kind of experience with the bag is really satisfying. And then the last one here is the duffel. This one actually is still in development in Italy, but same thing there. Those are hidden zippers behind the pleats, so you can shove shoes or other clothes in there, and then small details that are hidden. For example, in the bottom of the bag, inside is a zipper that you can, shove all your dirty laundry because you're not wearing it. and you're done with it. And so it can be in the bottom of your bag, and then it zips closed and kind of keeps these compartments separate as you travel. And so, like I said, they're just small, subtle engineering moments that were very considered. And they were considered from a place of function. And then they were very intentionally designed into the aesthetic to really give this minimalist look that I'm really going for. So that brings us to this project that I'm very excited to share with you. I'm actually quite proud of how it came out. And that doesn't always happen in development. So Gravity Sketch reached out in March or April. They sent me a headset, and Gravity Sketch had been on my radar for a while. Just being in footwear for about 10 years, it was something I was very aware of. And being a 3D maker person, like I mentioned before, it looked very intuitive and thoughtful. But it did take me a little bit to kind of, get to the understanding of how to use it. So I was excited that Gravity Sketch came at a time when I was in full-blown proof of concept mode. And so I had an idea of something that I already wanted to solve, and that's what I wanted to share with you here. So obviously the aesthetic of each of these 4 rooms is absolutely stunning. I definitely cannot afford a home that looks like this, but I definitely wish my space looked like this. And I would love to, even if I'm in an apartment for the rest of my life, I would love for my apartment to feel, kind of this thoughtfully designed, this beautiful, this kind of serene. And so a lot of times, we have these coffee tables, and the rest of our space is very considered. Obviously it's gorgeous. And a lot of times we have, books, we have candles, we have vases. A lot of times these books are really expensive. I just went to Japan and spent a bunch of money on books, and I was like, I didn't even know I would do this, but they're so cool and I want to bring them home. And so it would be a shame if, kind of some of these other elements that live in our space in reality with us, like lighters, remotes, maybe pens or pencils. There's other things that are a part of our everyday life that function in our lives, but don't necessarily match what this feeling is right here. And I really want to stress this idea of feeling, because again, industrial design is so product driven, and sometimes industrial design can lose emotion. And I think that's where fashion and charisma and feeling, like these spaces have feelings, become, fashion is just kind of like better at that. And obviously interior design. And so I'm really, really wanting to encourage industrial designers to lean into, how does a product feel? And what does it say about the person that owns it, but what does it express when it's on the table, when it's, in the car, when it's in the bag, when it's on your back, when it's, on the counter? What does it feel like? Does it feel like the Lysol, plastic container, or does it feel like a Prada backpack? Does it feel like a Lamborghini? Does it feel like a Porsche? Like, design language does not necessarily have to be limited to really cool items. Our everyday life could be filled with beautiful items that give a feeling even of like, serenity or peacefulness. And so this intersection of taste and function is really what we're considering here. And so the opportunity or the problem to solve is, how do we solve for everyday items that are maybe not as beautiful, to not disrupt the taste of these spaces. And so I jumped into Gravity Sketch, and I spent like 12 weeks or so learning the program, and I had to really dismantle that Gravity Sketch is not 3D modeling. And in 3D modeling, we really define things, in space. And I have these measurements here. I'm so used to, in Rhino specifically, drawing these walls and these shapes and defining these measurements, and things are really precise. And as we know with sketching, it's this kind of just like loose exploration of just, I'm putting my thoughts down and I'm ideating, and I'm just, sketching is kind of meant to be more prolific and just like capturing what you might see and hear, and then exploring new lines once you have lines on the page. And so it took me a while. And then there was kind of this aha moment I had with Jaron of, we're in a collab room together, and he's like, this is think of this as more of a wireframe. And when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know why that word kind of just made this like light bulb go off. And so when he said that, I kind of was like, oh, this is sketching in 3D. And like, I don't know why that took so long for my brain to like really catalyze, but once it did, I kind of just started really ideating, and it made this kind of intuition that I have towards 3D unleash, and it became just like the tool now where I'm like, I can't really imagine my life without Gravity Sketch, because I'm able to just come up with forms and 3 dimensions and a feeling so much quicker. And so yes, we went in and did several iterations of the concept, and I'll show you here in a little bit how it came out. But I wanted to walk you through the process of what it took to actually make this in real life. So the other kind of thing about this whole festival is the human essence in design and these digital tools. And humanness presumes error. Humanness presumes delta. It presumes margin, and we don't necessarily have a lot of that in exact tools like Rhino or SolidWorks or ZBrush. And so Gravity Sketch, I think, also is one of those programs that kind of reveals, it keeps things human, and I like that. And so we'll talk about that more later. So the model got done. This is the 3D print coming out, and it's getting primed and prepped. And then there was like a lot of sanding that had to be done, because anything that goes into a mold comes out of the mold, including small streaks and ridges. And so there was a prolific amount of work done on the actual 3D print before it was even ready to be modeled. And then we spent an hour and a half at the modeling shop learning what type of polyurethane to buy. And this was a AB, 2-part composite that we poured together. And so from there, I had to really prep the mold to take the object without holding it. So you have to wax it and put basically mold release everywhere. So when I pour the polyurethane in, it doesn't stick to the box. And then I also have to prep the model as well. So it's basically like putting Vaseline on it so that it doesn't stick to the polyurethane. So you mix the polyurethane together, the 2 parts A and B, 1-to-1. And I had done this process one time before, maybe like 5 years ago. And so I just went back to my videos from that and kind of followed it again and just followed my intuition. And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to sink these objects into the polyurethane. And so you can see here, I just kind of went for it. I was like, I'm going to fill it up halfway and then see kind of what happens. The problem is underneath there, it's concave. And so here I'm tipping it kind of back and forth left to right because there's an air bubble underneath because the bottom is actually concave. So I wasn't sure how I was going to solve that, but I just kind of like did my best. And this is what I landed on. So I didn't want to fill it all the way to the top because it was actually floating like a boat. So I poured it halfway, and then I used the clay to literally pin the 3D prints down in the polyurethane, and I let it cure for like 2 days. And then I went back in and re-greased only the 3D prints, and then re-poured in the polyurethane until it filled all the way to the very edge of the lip. Then I had to demold it. So I waited 2 days for the polyurethane to cure. And then this is me in my kitchen on a Saturday morning, demolding. And you can see on the video on the right there that it, I was like addressing how it was concave. So there was a massive air bubble. And I was like pretty disappointed about this, but you know, this is part of human fabrication. So I decided to just slowly fill that on its own. I just mixed a tiny amount, like 2 teaspoons, and filled that bubble up just so it was at least flat. And then the clay I left in there so that the concrete could actually pour in. This was like a very laborious process. It took me a while to kind of figure out exactly what I wanted to do. So this is me putting the mold back together because now we have to pour concrete in the mold. And you make these little registration points to make sure that it aligns perfectly. And the challenge with this is that my wall thickness on the product was about, I want to say 5 to 7 millimeters, which for concrete is like pretty thin. And so I really thought that these 4 registration points would be enough, and I kind of winged it. Usually you kind of want to put in more just when your tolerance is like that thin and you're working with like softer materials like the mold, the polyurethane, you can see it moves. So a lot of this was just guesswork and intuition. So then mixing concrete proved to be a nightmare. This took, I want to say, this entire process that you're about to see took, I want to say 7 to 8 hours on a Saturday afternoon and evening. So when you mix concrete, it can potentially like completely crumble. Imagine just mixing water and flour and like, okay, yeah, it makes a paste and you like pack it into a ball. But in 2 days, you could literally like tap it with a knife and the whole thing could crumble. So, and especially with as thin of walls as I had, you know, there was definitely some concerns about that. So there's actually 5 materials going into this whole composite. So here I'm mixing chilled water and the pigment because I was dyeing the concrete. And then I have over in the top left corner over there, I have water reducer because water can, you know, make it crumble more. And then fiberglass and then the concrete. And this actually was really, really hard to mix. So then we can get into casting. So as you can see, there's a little bit of grit. This was kind of the same as about, I would say, runny peanut butter. And this process right here, pouring it into the spout, I think took 3 hours of just sitting on the ground doing this. And I'm truly a big kid at heart, so I didn't mind it. And the concrete felt kind of cool anyway. So basically I just sat there, and typically you would use like a vibrating like palm sander, for example, and you would hold it almost on the side of the box to get the concrete to literally vibrate all the way down into the bottom of the mold. But I didn't have one, so we just winged it. And the benefit of that vibration is that it removes air bubbles. They, you know, rise to the top and, you know, really settle the concrete. So there's not these little air bubbles pocketing. So we finished this process. My friend is filming, and at the end, we had cleaned up everything. And you can see how on the front left there, it's like slowly sinking in. I was really worried that we didn't fill the mold enough. And sometimes you can put a hole in the bottom of the mold to wait for it to come out to see if you filled it enough. But we didn't do that either. Again, we just winged it. And so at the end of the night, it looked like that. And I was really worried that now all of a sudden, when we thought we had filled it, we didn't. But we just prayed and hoped for the best. And so this is us demolding it. The other thing I was really worried about was the concrete creeping or like bleeding out the side, and just not getting like a really nice clean finish. And I was also worried about the mold ripping in the event that there was not enough mold release. So I'm going super slow here. I had been wiggling it for a while prior to this point. And here it comes. So with no, all things considered, major issues, I was pretty ecstatic at this moment, just because I really didn't know if we put enough concrete in the mold to even just like fill the whole object. But it was a pretty flawless cast for the most part, with the exception of like this little thing that happened right here. I'm not really sure why that happened. And then it did bleed out, but I'm much rather have the bleed than like for this whole object to not be like fully complete. So we demolded both, and here it is out the mold. Pretty exciting. You can see all the little speckles are air bubbles that I was referencing. So if we had had a sander, those may have not have been there. And then we chipped off, all the extra bleeding. And you can see one side has more air bubbles than the other. One was the top of the mold, one was the bottom of the mold. And then there's all this wax that I'm now, starting to clean off. So because concrete is actually a very soft material, this required a lot of finishing. So I had to go in and, sand over and over. It still needs one more kind of sanding round than a sealant. Also, the pigment, sometimes when you buy, like, let's say a new red shirt and you wear it, you're like, why are my arms red or why are my arms blue? It's because the pigment is bleeding. So I have to also seal it as well after I finish sanding. But all in all, the fact that it came out with no major errors, I'm really happy. I think it looks like a river rock, which was kind of the main idea behind both the aesthetic and the material, was kind of speaking to this like really organic element in the space and speaking to brutalism. So here it is in its beautiful finished state. It needs, like I said, one more kind of round of sanding, but the main idea is really there. And we struggled initially to kind of get the lid to register, but there is a lip on the inside. I'll show you the actual object here in a second, but it does register perfectly. And here's how it's used. So I think Gravity Sketch was really the perfect program. I tried to do this in Sub D and Rhino as well, and it just didn't go well at all. So for those of you that have used the program and are familiar with that VR experience, just going in and being able to kind of just grab and pull the surfaces and the control points and be able to manipulate and measure and everything at the same time to create this form is something that I think really only Gravity Sketch could provide this like kind of fluidly and effortlessly. So I'm really excited to release this product to the public as a proof of concept accessory for the home. It does completely capture our ethos of functional minimalism. The object is intrinsically designed to solve a problem of, these kind of uglier electronics that we have that are an absolute necessity in our living room. But once the lid is on, it's really a beautiful item to have on your coffee table alongside your Virgil icon books and your, Brito or, BS candles that we all love. So, or BRS candle, I guess. So, I wanted to kind of take a moment to muse on this topic of digital craftsmanship. And, Gravity Sketches posed the question, how do we maintain this essence of like human creativity? And I think, this is a shoe that I've worked on, and I've worked in knit as well. And I think knit is another example where we have these incredibly powerful tools that are digital that yield these in real life, results, products, and or textiles. And a lot of times, we think about, well, how do we, we can almost put manufacturing at the front of the process. Industrial designers are literally trained to do design for manufacturing. And I think when it comes down to human essence or creativity, we have to keep the emotion and the feeling of the product at the front of the priority of the project, and then subsequently use your tools and cross-pollinate your tools to get the actual emotion in the end. And I think if this was more of like a sculpting or a craft, conversation, if we were to take a ball of clay or a lump of marble, you might initially use much larger material or much larger tools, right, to kind of knock away material. But then as you get in there, there's these tiny kind of chisels. And so it's this cross-pollination of different tools that gets you to the final result, which is a form. And a form is fundamentally a feeling. And so I think we have to strip, the design process back to what is the end expression that we want in the environment that our products are going to be living, and then build to that, as opposed to, okay, well, an injection molding machine opens this way, so we have to build it like this. And it's like, well, maybe part of it should be injection molded, and then part of it should be 3D printed, and then part of it should be sewn. And somewhere in that process, we end up with the final emotion that really captures the humanness or the feeling in the end. And so another example of that for me is, just like I said, really knowing your tools and using different tools to capture different results, and then blending those results to accomplish the feeling. And so this is an example of us working on the first prototype. And I like to do things myself before I take them to actual professionals, so that I have an understanding of what I'm really asking them, to do. So here, I'm just literally at my wood shop with my guy, Chris, and I just roped him into this project. He has a pneumatic nailer. I went there. I said, okay, we're going to do this together. He said, okay. And here we are making. And there's discovery that happens in 3D that you cannot see in 2D. And so if you hand off tech packs and you expect to find the most beautiful emotion from a 2D drawing, it's just not going to happen. And so making is where, when you translate into that third dimension, into that Z axis, is where we find emotion, and making sure that your design process allows for that discovery, and then using your tools to get, the end result. The other thing that I have found in my career is that CMF, color, material, and finish, is really paramount in following feeling. And so if you're really thinking about how you want something to express in the end, you're leveraging color, material, and finish in post-process to fully capture, kind of your vision. And I think sometimes in industrial design, things are so academic and traditional, and in fashion, there's a lot less like restraints, because the products and the things that they're doing over there don't have to function. And so I think if you think about your living room, or you think about your car, or you think about, you know, these moments like a microwave, or, you know, a trash can, like a simple human trash can, like, are there other emotions that a trash can evoke besides, you know, plastic or aluminum? And what feeling could you bring with a trash can, while, you know, preventing smell, while opening with the foot, while, you know, maybe separating recycle from, you know, garbage disposal or whatnot? And what else could your products be offering in terms of the expression or the feeling to, you know, our clients and to our users and to the people that are going to experience our stuff? And so color, material, and finish is really like, it's literally just as key as the engineering, as the main idea, as the form. It's its own, you know, it's its own thing. So that is my presentation. Thank you so much for following along. I want to show you this actual product so you can get a chance to see it and see the proportion in hand. If you're interested in following Proof of Concept's journey, you can find us on Instagram at proof_of_concept. And we are in our infancy, so stay tuned for drops. Make sure you drop on the website, put your email in, and keep up with us there. So I'm going to go back to my screen here and share this actual item. Dan, I know you've been itching to see that, so.
I have. I'm excited.
This is the final form. It came out pretty amazing. It bowed, you know, in the mold here. So when I talk about, you know, using your tools, this is really something to kind of like figure out how and why it happened there, but not necessarily, you know, on this side. But it's pretty. It needs one more sand job, but overall, I'm really happy with the shape. And then on the lid, we put this nice little flange. It's kind of blurring it out there, but yeah, this nice little flange so that it actually registers exactly to the edge. Shouts out to Jaren for helping me with that in Blender. And so I think that's also just another testament of like cross-pollinating, you know, use the strengths of different tools to accomplish, you know, what you're really looking for, and then blend them all together to kind of get this result that you're, you know, really interested in finding. So
Excellent. It's really cool. It's really cool. Can I ask, do you plan on making this commercially available?
I do. I really want to get it fabricated in Mexico or in Vietnam. Both are really strong in furniture development. So I'm gonna get it quoted, and then definitely want to release it as a proof accessory.
Well, congratulations. I mean, this is absolutely huge. I mean, when it was only 12 weeks ago when you started learning Gravity Sketch, and that challenge to actually design a product, make that product, and actually bring it to life in 12 weeks is truly incredible. We both come from the footwear industry, and that process is 18 months, you know, and to do that full process in 12 weeks and learn a new tool is really, really amazing. So a huge congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I wanted to ask a couple of questions, if that's all right, over your process, your learning journey. And yeah, it's so evident that you're a very hands-on person. I've followed you for a while. You're very much on the kind of sample end of things. You want to get making with your hands. Do you feel like there's an element of Gravity Sketch that appeals to you because you're very hands-on?
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the most intuitive tools. Once I kind of had my light bulb, I was like, oh, like, you know, this is kind of what I do in the real world, but in virtual reality. So I'm very, really thankful for it, just because the ideation process that I prioritize in real life with my hands was handicapped in the computer. And sometimes, I would sit in Rhino. Like, I was one of the few people, I think, in college and even after college, where I would kind of start in Rhino, and you weren't supposed to do that. You were supposed to start with sketches, but I would see it in my head and I would just jump to 3D. And it was like, oh, jump to 3D. And actually, if you scroll to the bottom of my Instagram, there's like me sitting at the bottom of a mannequin at a workshop at Nike, like, and the caption is just jump straight to 3D, because it just really is. You just get so much more information. And Gravity Sketch is the blend, I would say, of the ideation of 2D sketching with this discovery that I'm kind of suggesting is important in 3D. So,
yeah. Patrick Thornton, I started actually because I think it was right. He picked out something that you said earlier, and I think you said it. You said GS keeps things human, and it's that human element of things. And I think that's really what we're touching on, is this sculptural aspect of being able to kind of move things and form things, almost like you would with clay, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned there, like you would go straight into Rhino, like you would think in 3D,
Yeah.
and you'd want to ideate in 3D. You would go straight into Rhino and do that. Earlier on in the session, you mentioned about that kind of learning journey, or your mindset that shifted from saying, hey, look, I'm not 3D modeling, I'm 3D sketching. Could you go deeper on that? Like, when was that? How did that click? And what would you advise other people on that, I guess?
Yeah. Jaron and I touched on it a little bit in a Instagram live, of just like understanding that this is sketching in 3D. Like, it's not modeling. And so it took, like I mentioned, like a while for my brain to like understand that. I kept asking him questions like, how do you get these like points to, line up? And like, what if I want to, I want to make a surface, and then I want to make a surface, and like, I'm so used to kind of like offsets and cutting things and modeling. And so for some reason, it was that word wireframe that he mentioned, and I was like, oh, interesting. Like, it was almost like I interpreted it as skeleton for some reason in my head. And then there was something about that. I don't know what that did for my brain, but it took me out of my modeling brain and into like, you're just coming up with like the skeleton of it. And you may, make full forms, but at the time I was just drawing with the, with the pen, kind of the pen paint tool, or the pen little ball. And it definitely took me from like, okay, stop trying to make 3D forms and draw in 3D. And then that's when it was like, oh, okay. And then after that, I was like, okay. And then I sat in there for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours, like until my headset died later, like the next day, just like, because it was like, oh, now I'm unlocked. And so, but because I have been such a heavy modeler, it was hard for my brain to be like, okay, we're not modeling.
Yeah.
We're sketching. So, yeah.
And you mentioned Jaron. Jaron's one of our very own at Gravity Sketch. He supported you through this journey.
Yes.
So you had a few sessions with him just to help you learn the tool.
Yes.
I wondered, how important was it for you to have somebody to help you on your journey? Could you have learned by yourself? Or do you feel like, actually, you know what, collaborate with somebody else, because, it really helps to have somebody to guide you through that process?
I absolutely love learning. So anything that I can get like in person, whether it's like in class at a lecture, or, he and I were in a collab room, it's way easier to remember how to do something if somebody shows you how to do it. So like, I'll watch YouTube. Like, if I can't figure out something in anything, I'll watch YouTube. But I probably couldn't have done that concrete process like I did by myself if I hadn't done it one other time before, like 5 years ago. with somebody that showed me the process. So I think anytime you have, hands-on or very present human, it's like, how many times do we want to call the bank and get like like an operator, you want to call and talk to a person. And because there's also this other thing I noticed in design and also servicing creative directors and whatnot is there's a million ways to interpret things, and workflow has a lot to do with how you connect your steps. And so it's like, especially in 3D modeling, okay, well, you can't do this later if you don't first do these 3 steps, And so understanding the workflow of Gravity Sketch and like, okay, yeah, let's make this first and then we'll do this and then we can connect these together. And then, you don't really want triangles. You want, these quadrants and these need to connect in this way. So then you should model it in a certain way to begin with. And so just that hands-on, Jaron was so patient, and I'm sometimes like, so he really held my hand, and I don't think I would be able to have delivered if I didn't have that support. So.
Absolutely. We absolutely love Jaron. And one of the questions that came through in the chat here was, how long does it take for you to get comfortable in Gravity Sketch? I think that's different for everybody, but would be keen to know from your side, how long did you feel it took for you to be like, oh no, I've got this?
For me, probably like somewhere between 15 and 20 hours of sitting with Jaron and sitting by myself, just trying stuff. And initially, again, like I said, I had such a modeling hat on that it made it very arduous for me to understand what we were doing. Even though you can put it on, it's like, oh, it's super intuitive. It's like, yeah, until you try to make something. And then you're like, how do I make a chair? And I know that this, like, I want these 4 legs to look like this. And like, I can't even make one look like the other, And so these kind of precision tools that I'm so used to in modeling, it took me a while to kind of, like I said, if I didn't go in there with a model brain and I was just like, okay, we're sketching, and hey, Brittany, this is for sketching, and I could have, maybe it would have been faster, but it's not because the tool is hard to learn. It's the mindset and the workflow that you have to be in when you jump in there. And it took me a long time to get out of a modeling mindset.
Yeah, for me too, I think I was probably around 20 hours too. We actually ran a poll as you were speaking and asked that same question to everybody in the chat. And it's really interesting to see. And I think when we talk about Gravity Sketch, we usually talk around 20 hours. In the chat, interestingly, I think we've got some really advanced, really great users. It's looking at, I think 60% of people in this chat said it was taking them in and around 10 hours, which is really interesting. But yeah, it's like I think it's different for every person. And at the tail end of your conversation, you had some really great points around digital craftsmanship, and you used the term 3D a lot, and this idea of actually, ideating in 3D, converting an idea in 3D. As a general topic, Gravity Sketch or not, what would be your advice for somebody who is on the fence about learning illustration? Maybe like if we'd go in our previous world, they can do the best kind of Photoshop render of a footwear product, or Illustrator 2D render. What would be your advice for anybody that's... Hello, you got me?
It cut out for a minute. What would be my advice for...
Yeah, so take an example who's somebody who's very competent in 2D. And what would be your advice to them to push them over the edge to say, hey, you should learn 3D and this is why?
Like the reasoning?
Yeah.
I think it's just like kind of what I harped on, just the level of discovery that is in 3D that just isn't in 2D. And I think we get more information faster working in 3D. And I think the beauty of Gravity Sketch has taken that and made it exponential, because 3D, like for example, me making that cushion, right? That's probably like at least an hour of he and I, pushing and pulling fabric. And that's worth doing because you're learning about upholstery. But like the ideation that 2D is typically meant for, you just get a stronger, like I said, emotion or discovery in 3D. And when you get more, like when you're more prolific, there's more I don't know, things that come, it's discovery. It's not like trained, this is another thing, trained designers are trained to be prolific. Untrained designers, or as I call them, just creatives, because I don't consider them designers, they typically already have an idea in their head and then they want to make it in real life. For those of us that have an entire skill set and have a methodology and an ideology and a process by which we, bring things into the real world, you are mining your own brain and references and experiences and emotions and things you think are cool to come up with a new thing. So like the cream stool that I showed at the beginning, I probably had like 200 images of, chairs that I thought were compelling. And then I had my own kind of tinkering that I was doing with literally like clay, like this big. And then I had Rhino. And then I had all these kind of things that I was doing that I put a million ideas down. And then I started editing out, the proportions or the shapes or the details that didn't matter. And so you can go through that entire process much quicker. And I think that makes you less mentally fatigued. And so you're actually then able to put out even more. So if this is the end and, you have to do this much process before you get to 3D, and then 3D gives you this much information and you already kind of have a vision because you've already been in 2D. If you actually open this space up and you push this space back, there's way more room between 3D and the end of the project to actually do far more ideation and iteration in the spirit of discovery that is not possible in 2D.
Yeah, really interesting. I just want to bring in it's a question around the product itself. Actually, could you hold up the finished product?
Yeah.
So Andrew's.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. So Andrew here is asking, how does the product sound with it being concrete? Like, would you plan to add a rubber seal for when it closes, or in general, actually, now that you've physically made it now, do you plan any iterations?
I do. I definitely think this is V1. I love the question, how does it sound? I did not think of that. And that is totally in line with the idea of just emotion and final kind of like experience. So I want to make it for sure in multiple materials. I want to do a chrome one, like the Chicago bean chrome. I want to do potentially a resin one, or maybe like a silicone, like TPU situation. I think an overmold could be really cool if I could get that precision made. I could actually get that, made and maybe assembled together somehow. But there's also the primitiveness of the concrete kind of knocking together that kind of feels cool also. It speaks to brutalism as well. So those are all feelings that I have to consider. What do I want to deliver? And yeah, so I really like that question. Thank you.
And then one final one as we round off, and it's about your future projects. So, I mean, the question says, it's from you and Taylor Gibson. What projects do you have coming up, and how do you think you might use Gravity Sketch in them? Interested to know how this initial process will influence the next process or project, I assume.
Love that. I am working on a series of bags right now, and I had previously developed, and I'm looking to take another trip to Italy to kind of finish them out. And I see some challenges between patterning and kind of the actual forms that I really want. And so there's also a program called Clo 3D that, apparel uses. And so I would be interested in, between Gravity Sketch and the ideation of Gravity Sketch and Clo 3D, how can I get my bags to have, I can show you, I have a prototype right here. How can I get my bags to have the emotion that I want in real life, but are challenged because they are, clothes typically are made in 2D, right? They're patterns that are cut flat and then sewn together to create structures. So exploring, what that form could be without thinking about the pattern, and doing that in Gravity Sketch and in Clo 3D, and then using Clo 3D as well to help make that leap back to 2D. Because at the moment, bags, I did weave this tire bag in 3D. I have this thing on the bottom, but I put a backpack on the floor, and then I wove the stuff around it. So if I take the hood off, it actually sits like a basket. So I think with weaving and knitting and braiding, there is a way to make 3D forms in accessories pretty easily. But I definitely see Gravity Sketch continuing to be a part of that ideation of, I can drop a little human model in there and draw that shape, and then figure out, again, you're not going to get the depth, the Z axis on a piece of paper. And with backpacks specifically, or purses for girls and such, it's definitely a really important part of the emotion, because again, it goes back to the fashion and the charisma and just the styling of it all. So like I said, Gravity Sketch is definitely a part of my world now, and that's very genuine for me. So I really appreciate it. You guys helped me a lot.
Amazing. I can give you one recommendation. Somebody to follow is Jeff Thrasher. He does apparel and backpacks in VR. It's very, very cool. Anyway, we will need to close our session now. But I do want to say, Brittany, truly, it's been incredible to follow your journey, to see your learning path. And I appreciate your authenticity and honesty throughout the process. And I also want to say that I'm truly impressed and amazed that just in 12 weeks, you've brought something to life, which is truly incredible. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for today.